G'day everyone, so I had a day off, I figured I'd smash one of these out. Please go watch this video first, make sure I'm not misrepresenting him in the process of making this one. You'll probably have a much better idea of what I'm talking about anyway. So, Black Pigeon Speaks, the rise of anarcho tyranny in the UK. Sounds scary, doesn't it? Yeah, nah. So first, I'm going to break my own recently established rule and do an overall assessment of some incidental claims, I guess fact checks and clarifications, in the order that they appear. What can I say? I had the time and I just couldn't resist. First up, there's a bit where he says gun laws won't stop criminals from getting such weapons because of black markets. Well, sure, black markets operate outside the law and criminals could continue to have reasonable access to weapons from black markets for a time upon the hypothetical introduction of gun laws where they didn't previously exist. But the black market is sourced by purchases made legally at one point prior to an illegal act of acquisition. Less legal guns therefore means less illegal guns. This isn't really relevant to the UK anyway, which already has pretty tight gun laws, so I'm not sure why it's being brought up. There's a bit where he says that hate crimes are based on offending people and only need to be a matter of opinion. Well, on the Metro Police website he's citing, the only mention of the word offence or offend is via the legal definition, i.e. an offence has been committed, that sort of thing. There is no mention here of hate crimes being merely about causing someone offence as such. And really, people should be protected from hostility and prejudice, as per the description of a hate crime given here. I can't see a problem with that. And now, he also seems to have missed that the article is drawing a distinction between hate incidents and hate crimes. The website is describing hate crimes as a subset of hate incidents, the former of which the site specifically says will not always result in conviction. He even highlighted this himself, which is helpful. A hate incident is the one of the two hate-based scenarios for which no evidence is required, but that's because no conviction is being sought until a hate crime is alleged to have been committed. Then there's a bit where he makes a claim that cases like that involving Marcus Meechan are common, but gives no further examples or data to convince us that this is true. And really, when Jimmy Carr can say that shitting in a woman's cunt will make a gay dude want to have sex with her, instead of being charged with a hate crime he gets convicted of tax evasion down the line, I'm not buying this idea. I'll have a bit more to say about this specific Count Dankula incident in a while, by the way. I'm sorry to say. He says Naz Shah is a key Corbyn ally. I can't really work out why. She is a Labor MP who's in some hot water, and fairly so, I think. The Labor Party should give her the flick for liking and sharing a very offensive parody tweet, because I don't think you can reasonably claim you accidentally liked and retweeted something. Even though I am sure she doesn't think victims of child sexual exploitation should shut their mouths for diversity, she herself has been quoted as saying Asian men are overrepresented among such criminals. Again, we're coming back to that. But the relevance of Corbyn is a bit tenuous to me. Now this one's the doozy. He describes child sexual exploitation, which I'll call CSE from now on, of white children by Pakistani men as common intercultural exchanges. And there's this 1 million abused youngsters figure here as well. Okay, look, Rotherham did involve mostly white children. There are other examples of similar scenarios as well. However, BPS provides no evidence for his claim that the practice is common. Indeed, reports such as this from the NWN UK show that this abuse often happens to Muslim girls as well. And most importantly, the CEOP report into the practice of CSE, which is the first attempt to assess patterns of CSE in the UK, stated that we cannot draw national conclusions about ethnicity because the data is too inconsistent. BPS, I believe, therefore, is citing no evidence for this claim to commonality because no evidence for it exists. Following on from that, he says that Sarah Champion was pushed to resign from her position after the Sun article that she wrote about these incidents, Rotherham and similar. Rather, I think she was pushed to resign because the article included statements like the following. For too long we have ignored the race of these abusers and, worse, tried to cover it up. No more. These people are predators and the common denominator is their ethnic heritage. See, to me it seems quite clear that she was pushed to resign because this statement and others are both incorrect and unhelpful. We cannot conclude at present that ethnicity is the common denominator in CSE cases in the UK, according to the only research conducted anyway. And to go back a bit to the 1 million abused youngsters number, this comes from Sarah Champion in this interview with the Mirror. Now this is a number for which she gives no source other than her own hunch. Now I'm sure it's very difficult seeing so many abused women, hell from my own work I know it is, but you need to have a better idea of a situation before you start throwing numbers about. Moving on from that. BPS says that tyranny is wielded via the Communications Act. The biddy sites essentially said it's illegal to harass people. I don't really mind that, to be honest. BPS describes Tommy Robinson as being viewed as a thought criminal. Well, despite Tommy's statements that he was persecuted for being right-wing rather than being part of instigating a 100-man fight at a football game, I can't agree with that either. Okay, so a fair bit of this video was, well, incorrect. I'd love to stop there really, but BPS is touching on a few points that I think do need a bit more of the old discussion. First off, Marcus Meechan. Oh my god, that look on her face. Not thrilled with life. Anyway, this has been done to death, and I thought I'd avoided saying anything about it. But it is true, the conviction is a problem. Judges saying that context doesn't matter worries me, because context absolutely does matter. For example, it's the difference between parody that harms something and propaganda that supports it. I do also think at this stage that parody was Meechan's intent, though intent does matter less than context. Indeed, outcomes need to be considered, such as the effect that such jokes might have on people. This guy, his views and his actions, I think need to be critically discussed and analysed, and I think called out for missing the mark. But the same must be said of convictions and setting a legal precedent. I don't see the outcome of deciding that context doesn't matter being in any way a good thing. Second, the case of Rotherham, Telford, etc. do highlight a very serious issue, about which I think BPS is close to being correct. There is commentary on official reports re Rotherham that counsellors were afraid to disclose or act on the child sex rings. Here's a direct quote from the independent inquiry pictured. Several staff described their nervousness about identifying the ethnic origins of perpetrators for fear of being thought racist. Others remembered clear direction from their managers not to do so. Now that is a very serious issue. The fact that at least some people felt that being labelled racist may be an outcome of acknowledging the ethnicity of perpetrators implies that there needs to be a clearer articulation of laws and values across the board that lends itself to some need for self-criticism. But I don't think the social justice movement as a whole, and probably nearly its entirety, would have reacted in such a way. In my digging I found this previously mentioned quote from BPS's new mate Naz Shah. Yes, Pakistani men are disproportionately involved in grooming gangs, and this particular model of abuse. And no, that is not a racist statement. And it isn't. And I don't think anyone, or at least most on the social justice side of politics, would have an issue with it, nor would they believe Shah is racist towards her own community, despite the fact that the CEPO reports don't actually agree with her statement and are more forgiving than even she is. The problem arises when people take events like this and use them to make racist commentaries, a la Sarah Champion. Even if Asian men were overrepresented in reliable statistics, it would not be fair, moral or accurate to suggest that the problem is a result of inherent differences or to be laid at the feet of the immigrant community. Which leads me back to addressing BPS directly. He makes a statement about how in Western nations we ostensibly can't, quote, even reasonably or rationally discuss these topics. Considering what I've seen and heard from him recently, I'm of the opinion that the biggest barrier to reasonable and rational discussion in the case of BPS is himself. There have been a great many examples now in which the BPS channel has been shown to employ methods that lead to a serious clouding of the facts, or far too often inaccuracies that go unacknowledged, unresponded and unrectified. Given this, it becomes harder and harder to believe that these were all honest oversights, and I doubt many at this point can reasonably argue otherwise. If you want more reasonable and rational discussion, one needs to start by moving closer to it themselves, but that has never been what BPS has done. To use this video as an example, BPS has highlighted a very real and troubling example of CSE and the systematic failures that allowed it to perpetuate. He has, however, then gone on to, and without evidence, describe the abuse of, his words, young white girls by Pakistani men as being common. This is not reasonable, this is not rational. And to go a bit further, and without absolving the social justice side of whatever role we have to play in setting or allowing this narrative, when it's people like BPS stating that, despite some clear evidence to the contrary, that mentioning the race of offenders will on its own lead you to denouncement and criminal conviction, perhaps you could assess yours and other conservatives' role in leading people to think that this is true. In the context of this video, I'd suggest that people making the claims you are about the CSE issue aren't innocent, so the anarcho-tyranny commentary doesn't apply to you. And just to tick all my boxes, yes, Dankula's example is a troubling one, but if that was what you were concerned about, I reckon you'd be addressing that itself, not tying it to your pre-proven nationalist and racially driven sentiments. Anyway, corrections and well-intentioned discussion is welcome. This was Yeah Nah. Cheers, cunts.